Today's video is a bit of a lesson. It's a lesson on character. It's a lesson on integrity. It's a lesson on what you do when you find a story that confirms all of your priors, or at least on the surface, it appears to confirm all of your priors. When I find myself in this situation, which happens a lot because, right-wing newsfeed, people tweet out stuff all the time that looks really good, looks really interesting, confirms everything that I believe and what you guys believe out in the audience, and I can present it to you. But when I see stories like that, I double fact check them. I triple fact check them. Unfortunately for the Young Turks, they have no such integrity. They have no such fact checkers. In fact, I doubt that they have any fact checkers at all. When TYT hears a story about supposedly Texans coming up to New York and attacking a hostess over vaccine cards, TYT does not do anything to verify this information. They just run with it and go absolutely crazy because that story to them is gold and they're not noble enough to not run with that kind of tale. Oh wait, did I just say gold and then noble? Oh crap, we have a sponsor. I'm gonna roll into it. It's fine. If you've been following the news, you're likely hearing the word tapering a lot. This is because this is the new Federal Reserve buzzword. And you might be hearing from the media a lot of different meanings, but what it actually means is that the US federal government has to repay $30 trillion in debt, and it's going to come out of your pocket. When Janet Yellen ran the Fed, she said that we would never see another financial crisis in our lifetime. Well, 4 years later, and all of a sudden the Federal Reserve is warning us of financial catastrophe and how imminent it is. But fear not, friends, because Noble Gold has got you covered. They will prepare you to weather the storm of the upcoming inflation. Start a precious metals IRA or 401k with them this month, and you will receive a very special 5-ounce silver America the Beautiful coin. This will help you hedge against inflation, protect your investments, and again, you get this giant 5-ounce silver America the Beautiful coin. It's a giant quarter. I love it. It's pretty awesome. Get a hold of one by going to my affiliate link at noblegoldinvestments.com, which is in the pinned comment and in the top of the description of this video, or calling them at 877-646-5347. Again, that's 877-646-5347. Or use my affiliate link at the top of the description or the pinned comment. In mid-September, the left-wing media was gripped with what they believed was a fantastic tale. Here you had, allegedly, people from Texas coming up to New York City, a city that has a vaccine mandate for restaurants, sitting indoors and all that, and these Texans were not going to play by the rules, so rather than just taking their comeuppance when they didn't present their vaccine cards and going to eat somewhere else, they decided to attack these poor hostesses who were just trying to keep people safe from the virus. They were just trying to protect all of our lives with these mandates. So everybody in the left-wing media immediately ran with it. But unfortunately for them, these supposed right-wingers from Texas turned out to be 3 black women that did in fact have their vaccine cards that viciously attacked a hostess and then later on claimed racism, so they were backed by Black Lives Matter, of course. Now in this situation, I would have held off on the story because that's what I do. I hold off on stories until more information comes out so I can give you the most accurate information possible rather than jumping the gun and looking like a total ass. But that's me. We're talking about TYT. So of course they ran with this story and they talked about how it was indicative of right-wing terror. Now, you should be able to tell from this video, based on what you're seeing in the video, that the attackers of this hostess are not white. They're not likely to be right-wingers statistically because that's how it works. It turns out to be 3 black women from Houston, age 49, 44, and I think the other one is in their 20s, and if you just go to their names, then you could know that even if you were confused about that pileup about who was actually enacting violence on one another. The 3 suspects that were arrested in this case are named as follows. Kaida Rankin, age 44, her niece Tyone Keisha Rankin, and Sally Rochelle Lewis, age 49. Now again, their names were released publicly at the time that TYT put out this video. On top of that, you can see in the cell phone video from the street view who's actually doing the attacking, and they're not wearing any type of restaurant uniform, so likely these people are clearly the patrons. And on top of that, they're eating at Carmine's. For those of you who are not New Yorkers, for those of you who are not savvy to how things works, Carmine's is a little bit of a chain. They have a couple locations in Manhattan and maybe one location in another borough. And typically the people who dine at Carmine's happen to be black. Like, that's just what it is. If you ask a black person to recommend an Italian restaurant, I guarantee you, because I've done this before, you're going to hear the word Carmine's. And sometimes they'll give the caveat that it's a bit of a chain and it's super basic, but this is the clientele of that restaurant. So if you knew anything about New York, you knew who the customers were in question. If you watched the video with any eye of skepticism rather than seeing what you wanted to see, you knew who was attacking somebody on the video. On top of that, if you knew the victim was Asian and you've seen any crime statistics ever of interracial crime against Asians, you knew who was attacking who on the video. But the Young Turks ignored all of this in order to go after the right-wingers from Texas. By the way, they're from Houston, one of the blue cities in Texas, in order to make their statement about how you're doing the bad thing.
That was the scene in New York City where a group of, tourists from Texas showed up to get into an indoor dining area at a restaurant in the Upper West Side. And when presented with the fact that they need to show their vaccine proof, at least one dose of a vaccine proof, fights broke out instead.
Okay, so this is the original story. This is the misinformation in the story. The idea that the fight broke out over these three women not showing their vaccine cards. Apparently, these women did in fact show their vaccine cards, and Carmine's does not dispute that they showed their vaccine cards and they were allowed to be seated. However, when other members of their party tried to come into the restaurant, specifically black males, they did not have proof of vaccination, or they did not have legitimate looking proof of vaccination. So these three black women attacked the Asian hostess because they were following the rules as prescribed by New York City. Now, I'm against the vaccine mandate for indoor dining. I've talked about this multiple different times. Mayor Bill de Blasio did not even pass a law. He just did this via executive action. And the way that he did this was he said, the voluntary phase is over. We don't care. We tried voluntary. Now you're going to do what we want. And it makes people like these restaurant owners in vulnerable positions when they have to go up against angry, rageful, and violent people, and this is the reason in part for the attack. However, I noticed something very specific that J.R. Jackson does not reveal to you in this video, and it's absolutely amazing. Just listen to the information he gives you about these suspects.
So let's get to some of the details of what happened. The attack happened outside Carmine's restaurant on the Upper West Side early Thursday evening. The 22-year-old hostess asked the group of Texans to show proof of getting the COVID vaccine in order to dine in the restaurant, which is part of New York's executive order that went into effect this week. Law enforcement sources said that the hostess was then repeatedly punched in the face and body and sent to the hospital. So Carmine's, that restaurant, said that the incident was a shocking and tragic situation when one of our valued employees is assaulted just for doing their job, as is required by city policies and trying to make a living. So the three suspects, they're 21, 44, and 49. They're going to be facing some charges. We don't know exactly what those charges are yet. So the three suspects, they're 21, 44, and 49.
So J.R. Jackson gave us just now the ages of the three perpetrators in this assault, those who were arrested for this crime. But very interestingly, with the ages, he did not give us the names, which means one of two things. One, the Young Turks are lazy in doing their research and they couldn't find the names that were clearly associated with the ages of these women in virtually every single article. Or two, they knew the names and they decided deliberately not to include them in the story because it would totally undercut the narrative that they're about to put forward about the nature of the people who did the attack. They're about to frame this as a right-wing attack in a leftist city by angry right-wingers who I guess came up from Texas in order to start this fight. It's very interesting how this video exists as a snapshot in history. And speaking of snapshots, by the way, I started an Instagram for this channel, instagram.com/actualjustice. Also, speaking of Texas and right-wingers, since I'm doing transitions, I will be at the Better Discourse event, Better Discourse 3, in Dallas, Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area, on November 6th of this year. Link in the description. Get your tickets. Come out and see me live. But anyway, let's get into Cenk starting to spaz out.
The real problem is the fact that a vaccine request from a hostess who's doing her job got this kind of response.
Yeah, no. They need to set an example here. They need to charge them with really serious crimes, and they need to put them in jail for at least a year. So why am I saying that, guys? Normally we talk about criminal justice reform, and America, generally speaking, punishes too much, not too little. But in this case, if they just let people off with fines, it's going to encourage more violence.
So I like that Cenk is coming out really strong. They need to go to jail for at least a year. No fines, nothing like that. Send that 49-year-old black woman that attacked that Asian hostess to jail. Send her 44-year-old counterpart to jail. At least a year. And the 20-something-year-old, the niece, also needs to go to jail. You can't let these people attack Asian hostesses because they're angry, because that sets a bad example. I mean, Cenk would never be covering this story. He would never be reporting on this if he knew the race of the people, or if he were acknowledging the race of the people involved. So it's absolutely fascinating to look in on his psychology. When he hears Texan, he thinks vaccine passport issue, so right-winger, associates it with white people, and he wants them put in jail for a year. And he says, oh, we normally talk about criminal justice reform and how America is too harsh. So Cenk is not in favor of harsh punishments, except for when it's his political opponents, and they're not even violating a law. This has to do with the regulation. I mean, the law that they violated was assault, but the vaccine passport is a regulation. It's an executive order. It's done through executive fiat, and it shouldn't stand up in court. But Cenk's like, jail, jail, jail. We need to put them in jail. And he's about to escalate in ways that we know for a fact Cenk loves to do.
Like, this is a nonstop violence by the right wing. And whenever they don't like their way, they go, I have the freedom. I have the freedom to spread deadly diseases to you. Now I have the freedom to swing my arms wildly and punch you in the face several times. No, you do not have that freedom. No, you're impinging upon my rights when you hit my face.
Cenk, there's absolutely no evidence at this point, at the point that I'm shooting the video, or more importantly, at the point that you're shooting the video, that these people were in fact right-wing. You are trying to glean that they are right-wing from the limited facts that you have chosen to take in, combining that with your confirmation bias in order to make a political point and demand what is a political prosecution. Cenk would not be in favor of these people being prosecuted for so long if he didn't believe them to be right-wing. Also, they are actually left-wing, because what ended up happening after they assaulted this woman in an unprovoked attack, look at the surveillance video, they said that the Asian woman attacked them, look at her run up on her and then start attacking her on surveillance video that was released later, was claiming racism. Now, they didn't claim racism when they were arrested. They didn't claim racism at the restaurant. They claimed racism when the press was zeroing in on their bad behavior to their lawyers. And you know who took up this mantle? Black Lives Matter, a distinctly left-wing organization, sided with them, and they did a protest against Carmine's because Carmine's should allow their hostesses to be subject to attack by black people if they feel even the slightest bit offended, according to Black Lives Matter.
It's more than Carmine. It's more than Dr. Rankin. It's about protecting black women.
And what will clear that up is for Carmine to do what? Release the tape. A black manager came out and apologized for that employee.
And by the way, this Asian hostess apparently started this job relatively recently. After these women put her in a hospital, and by the way, apparently they were yelling racial epithets at her, calling her bat soup and things like that, she has not returned to her job. So only a couple days on the job, put in this spot by New York City where she has to check vaccine passports, in order for people to have indoor dining. She's viciously attacked by these black women, supported by the left wing, not by the right wing, and Cenk is talking about right-wing violence in America. Absolutely shameful. And again, it just goes to show you how rare actual right-wing violence is. This is the reason why we actually know the date of the time that Trump people became violent, because it's so rare, because they have to make up, manufacture, and twist instances of left-wing terror in order to make it right-wing violence.
So they should send a very clear message and charge them with very serious crimes. They punched that woman in the face multiple times, and God knows what kind of damage they could have done if they weren't stopped eventually.
Yeah, I agree. You cannot allow these types of mob violence incidents to go on in your country and in New York City. And for far too long, these types of attacks, these sneak attacks, these sucker punches have been permitted by our society because we don't want to look in the face of who's actually perpetrating them and enforce the law against them. So I agree with Cenk. Unfortunately, the only reason Cenk is on the right side of this issue is because he doesn't either acknowledge or know the race of the attackers. And by the way, there is no follow-up video on the Young Turks channel about Black Lives Matter taking the side of the attackers. So they've never produced a correction. They've never done a retraction on this because their likes to dislikes on this video are relatively positive. And by the way, just so you know how ill-informed the Young Turks audience is, not only is their audience under the impression that these were right-wing white people, but they also believe that they're male. So literally everything about the description of the attackers in this video, the commenters have gotten wrong due to the Young Turks' sloppy reporting and their politicizing of this attack in order to attack their opponents.
And so if you don't put an end to it, vigilante violence from the right wing, thinking that they're defending freedom from government tyranny at Carmine's, from pasta tyranny at Carmine's. I'm joking, but I'm not. They're going to do way more violence as we go forward.
So Cenk is labeling this right-wing vigilante violence against pasta tyranny at Carmine's, when in reality, these three black women that viciously attacked the Asian hostess for doing the job as prescribed to her, not only by Carmine's, but by the city of New York, are using an alleged racial epithet, which, by the way, they're 100% lying about it. I don't believe them at all. They are liars, as an excuse for their left-wing vigilante violence against her. They're saying, yes, we attacked her. Yes, we were vicious in our group attack against this girl. We started this fight at Carmine's, but that's because she said a no-no word allegedly against us. Now, by the way, it is alleged by multiple members of the staff that they were throwing racial epithets at her, the Asian girl that they were beating down for no reason. But they're saying their attack is justified. They got Black Lives Matter coming to the restaurant to say their attack was justified because this girl said a racial no-no word that she did not say. They're absolutely lying. Look at the video again, how they approach her from behind. They didn't approach her from behind because they heard her say a racial epithet. That's absolute nonsense. Other members of her party were rejected from coming into this, so they went on the attack, and the attack was vicious and brutal. We have to stop this left-wing vigilante violence over words because words are not violent.
Yeah, and I'm out here in this area. I live in Jersey, right next to New York, and the really sad part about this is how many other options they had, because you can still eat outside. You can still order food. You can still enjoy the city in a variety of different ways. And what's important is to really, for the same people who obviously always talking about the rights to privacy, don't want to hear that.
So I've never seen this guy on the Young Turks before, but honestly, he's just like the rest of the Young Turks. Completely worthless in his commentary. Did you catch what right he referenced in argument for this or around this? Makes no sense. Just hear it again.
For the same people who obviously always talking about the rights to privacy, don't want to hear that. Rights to privacy.
So he says, you have so many other options in New York City. You can actually eat outside if you want to. And for these people who reference the right to privacy, don't want to hear that. Again, what you're looking for is property rights. I know it's confusing for you. I know you're not following because if you work for the Young Turks, you can't be that intelligent about what the right wing actually argues. But the issue of privacy has to do with showing your medical information. But what you're talking about, what you're trying to make a hypocrisy point based on the idea that you think these people are right wing when they are in fact not right wing, is that these people talk nonstop about property rights. This is the point that you're trying to make. And it's hypocritical of them to not respect the property rights. It's not that they're not respecting the privacy of Carmine's. How could you even possibly make this point in any way? Absolutely shameful. Fix your microphone. You're on a major channel with 5 million subscribers. Why are you even a contributor? And also, if you're in New Jersey and you know the area, then you should know the clientele of Carmine's.
The same people who don't want to deal with the consequences of the choices that they make. If you don't want to get vaccinated, we're not forcing you to do it. The country's not forcing you to do it. However, if you don't get vaccinated, then there's going to be places that you can't enter. There's going to be places that you can't go. However, many Americans are so childish that they just can't handle that.
Again, while this is true with this specific policy, you're not being forced to be vaccinated. You're just being punished for not being vaccinated, which is not the same exact thing. There are policies specifically in New York City that are forcing people to get vaccinated. There's a federal mandate of places with over 100 employees where you have to get vaccinated or you have to be forced into testing every single week, which is the policy that used to be in the hospitals here in New York until they got rid of the testing. So yeah, people are being forced to be vaccinated. This is not one of those instances because this is just a punishment that is unnecessary for not being vaccinated. And again, the childish people who aren't following the rules, who decided to attack somebody over this, are not right-wingers, they're left-wingers aligned with Black Lives Matter. I can't wait for your follow-up on this where you actually admit that you're wrong and admit that your talk about right-wing terror was absolutely nonsense, politically motivated, and is actually more indicative of your lack of character more than anything else.
And as you pointed out, and as we just saw from the video, this type of radicalization is hitting the streets.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter radicalization did spread all over the country. I mean, they claimed racism after a vicious attack where they're 100% in the wrong because they knew to a certain portion of the population that even though they violated the rules of our society, they acted viciously in their level of violence against a hostess, that some percentage, some political organizations would ultimately end up siding with them if they just claimed racism as an excuse for their unprovoked violence. Absolutely shameful, the left-wing radicalization that we're dealing with. And again, I will wait for you to come out with your follow-up video. I'm waiting on the retraction. I'm waiting on you to acknowledge the terror that Black Lives Matter wreaked on this nation last year and the sense of entitlement people feel when they act terribly if they just claim racism after the fact, well after the fact.
You know, like you said, there needs to be an example made out of them so that people know that there will be consequences if they decide to do this.
Yes, we do need an example of these people. People need to know that you can't viciously attack other people and then claim racism later and get a slap on the wrist. That you can't be treated like the victim. That people aren't going to raise money for you and protest on your behalf. Absolutely agree. We need to make an example of these people.
It's weird how folks maybe come up from Texas. You know, a lot of people from different states, especially when it's more of the conservative type of states. And I don't know these folks' background, but the one definitely thing is, you come to our state, you follow our rules. Did you not know New York had this put in place? Did you not know that these liberal bastions were doing things like this to make sure people are protected and they have these different policies in place? We know what Governor Abbott's doing down in Texas. So if you go down to Texas, you can understand what you're gonna get yourself involved with, whether you like it or not. It's what the locals may say. So why doesn't that apply here?
Now, I don't necessarily disagree with what J.R. Jackson said right there, although I did notice him going out of his way to give the caveat that he has no idea what the background of these people are. That's called plausible deniability. But it is interesting that the left is often against the idea of local control, and the right is often accepting of that. However, it's not really relevant in this scenario because you're not allowed to viciously and violently attack people in either Texas or in New York City. So, I mean, they should know that they can't behave that way anywhere. But again, they feel entitled and they feel like they can get away with it if they just claim racism after the fact. And they've gotten Black Lives Matter to protest on their behalf, despite overwhelming evidence that they engaged in the violence, that they initiated the violence, because they claimed racism well after the fact.
That's a great point, JR. Whenever you go down there, they do that weirdly terroristic threat of like, you're not around these parts, huh? Right?
Jank, that's not a terroristic threat. What that basically acknowledges is that you're in a different place. You should recognize the culture. You, of all people, Cenk, on the left, should accept that. But notice the Southern accent coming out. Cenk can only do Southern accents. He can't make arguments at all, as explained in our previous video on the Joe Rogan thing, because he has no point. He can never make any points. All he can do is strawman. It's not a terroristic threat. It's basically the equivalent of saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
All right, well, not around these goddamn parts of New York. And by the way, what used to be all of America, you're not allowed to punch people. That isn't your goddamn freedom.
Cenk, we understand that you're not allowed to punch people. We understand that you're not allowed to burn, loot, and riot. You're the ones who supported that. You supported left-wing terror all throughout last year, so it's not surprising to me that people in the group that you idolize, that you protect, that you shelter from any responsibility, think that they can get away with their vicious attacks by claiming racism after the fact. Again, turn around and look in the mirror, Cenk, because you're the problem here, not any right-wingers. No right-wingers are attacking random people at restaurants in New York City. That didn't happen. This is why you have to reach, stretch, hide information about who actually did the attack in order to even do this story. But keep spazzing out.
I know these lunatics have lost their minds. Oh, I have total freedom to do anything I want, right? Oh, I can drive 200 miles per hour in your residential area and maybe it kills your kids, but I have freedom. Government tyranny. No way, man.
Cenk, whoever made that argument that you're allowed to drive 200 miles in a residential area and maybe kill a kid. Again, no point at all. You're just screaming freedom in a Southern accent because you can never make coherent arguments.
You know what? The government tyranny to put a mask on, government tyranny to put pants on or underwear on. I'm gonna show my junk at the mall. Freedom, freedom, and they believe it. They believe it. I swear, they'll watch this video and they'll be like, that's a good point. Why aren't I showing my junk?
Again, not wanting the federal government to mandate masks, especially for vaccinated people, especially for children in schools, when we've seen by the data, they are not at this great risk of COVID. They're significantly less likely to get it, die from it, transmit it, etc. We know that COVID gets worse as you get older. This is according to the CDC and all the data. This is why other countries, not named Canada or the United States, don't do the mask in schools. Is perfectly reasonable. Nobody's saying that you should be able to flash people in public, except for some nudists, and I'll bet your bottom dollar where they tend to fall on the political spectrum.
But listen, guys, you're mad at Mayor Bill de Blasio for passing that law or that rule. That's a different thing. You punch a hostess in the face for no goddamn reason because of your stupid entitlement. Think about their mentality. I'm entitled to go into that restaurant. I'm entitled to punch you in the face if I even disagree with you a little bit. No, you're entitled to a jail cell for at least a year.
Again, I agree with Cenk, but not for the reasons that he wants. Think of the entitlement in this scenario. These people are caught on video viciously attacking this hostess. They instigated the fight. You can see it in the video. They walk up behind her, start screaming right in the back of her ear because she didn't let her friends in the restaurant according to New York City's vaccine mandate rule. They didn't like it. They felt disrespected, so they attacked her mercilessly on video, but then they say that they're justified, that they're entitled to initiate this vicious act of violence against this Asian hostess because supposedly at the same time that she was disallowing people according to New York City's law, this hostess, for no reason at all, that works in a restaurant that serves a ton of black people, decided to drop the N-bomb or a racial epithet at them that they could hear from the back of the restaurant while they were coming out, and then getting in her ear and then attacking her. Absolutely shameful and disgusting, and the entitlement of them is absolutely horrifying, and the fact that Black Lives Matter took their side and protest the restaurant just shows you the level of virtue in their movement. Again, the reason I'm highlighting this video is the utter shameful hypocrisy of the Young Turks. They would not cover this if the race of the people out there was in public view initially. The only reason they jumped on this is because they heard Texas, something to do with vaccine passports and violence, and they covered this story as if it was white right-wingers, and they did it so badly that a good portion of the Young Turks comments think that these were white males doing the violence against this Asian woman hostess. Absolutely disgusting, shameful in every way. I'm repeating myself, so you know that's time for me to say that's all I really have for you guys today. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video, then show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias, including my new Instagram, instagram.com/actualjustice. Get at tickets to the Better Discourse 3 event. Come see me live. It's amazing. So many people will be there. Subscribe, support, blah, blah, blah. Till next time.